Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, how you doing, everybody? Good morning. It is Thursday, July 20th, 2017. I finally made it to the microphone. Actually took the day off of basketball camp today, so that's nice. It should have been much easier to get on the air on time, but any task that you give yourself expands to fill the time allotted for it, and we missed the mark by a couple of seconds, and so, whoops, sat down and started to get ready to rattle off the stories of the day and realize, I don't have any of the materials that I usually sit down with. Where's all my stuff? Maybe I can go and run and grab them during the intro. Well, I got it. And here we are, and now I will sort through the issues of the day with you the best I can. We're way behind on the various explanations of Donald Trump's Russia conspiracy, collusion, whatever you want to call it. And we haven't caught up with the many stories published over the weekend on this stuff. And we ignored it for the much bigger story at the time of the demise of what still remains zombie treason care, and I guess could always come back. But it looks like they're putting it seriously looks like they're putting an end to that chapter with the interview by the failing New York Times of the president in the Oval Office once again. And good point made by Matt Iglesias. You can tell how much the president hates the failing New York Times by the number of times he gives them exclusive access interviews inside the White House. And they continue to print the transcript of those exchanges. And I tell you, nothing will convince you faster of how dumb our current supposedly president actually is. I mean, the guy's a mental midget, and he's checked out. There's nothing going on in his brain, and it's a tough time, of course, to be talking about what's going on in people's brains as we find the news this morning after downplaying the medical news for so long, a couple of days, but solidly for the past couple of days, downplaying the seriousness of John McCain's condition. It now turns out that he's got a fairly serious brain tumor, and I don't know how long he'll be with us, and lots of delicacy around the subject, of course, because it's the tone police will be out in force today. So I don't know. I have nothing really to add to the McCain story except to say that it has happened, and I take special interest in watching people try to be diplomatic about his condition when he's been so indelicate about other people's conditions in the past. And, of course, that includes people coming out with stories about how when they were ill, they wrote to their Arizona senator asking for his help and his support in trying to build a healthcare system that could cover them and give them some hope of recovery, and he pretty much shut the door on them. But, whatever. Now it's his turn. We all take our turn eventually, and we'll see if we can manage not to participate in the politeness wars and the tone monitoring that will be going on today. Anyway, there's plenty of other things that we should be rounding up and catching up on. I don't even know where to begin. On the one hand, I would love to spend the entire show reading through the transcript of the interview with the New York Times because it's so chock full of idiocy you won't believe it. On the other hand, you already do believe it, so I don't know if it's time well spent. We'll see. Bill in Portland, Maine has started us off. Thanks very much with a morning tweet. Daily Coast Radio is now live. I've reversed those two words, but it is live now. Kagro X, that's me. Hi, David Waldman. Whenever I read Bill's tweets, I'm reminded to introduce myself to the audience and tell them who's speaking. Of course, we have that announcement up at the top. It says it, and then I go for 2 hours, and then at the end of the show, it reminds you. But in between, I should probably tell you those things. One of these days, we'll professionalize this show. We'll be forced into conventional radio shape, but perhaps you're listening to us on the conventional radio perhaps on podcast. If you're listening on podcast, of course, you already know who you're listening to. It's difficult to remind myself that though there are others that could be joining the show randomly. And welcome to it anyway. Bill tells us Kagro X, me, will be taking stock of Trump's 6 months in office with 3 words, big dumb baby. Yeah, that pretty much summarizes it. I don't even know. I don't know what to tell you. There's a tweet circulating, like with most things. These stories that I do for 40 minutes, an hour and a half can be summarized in a tweet, believe it or not. That's the genius of radio. We expand them into a 2-hour program, take someone's 140 words and go to town. Okay. Well, the first 6 months of the current administration, and I guess we should enclose that in scare quotes, has this to boast of for its record, in addition to, of course, his claiming to have signed the most legislation of any president ever, and that not being true or not even near true. We have, we can hold up the president's campaign promises, and, on the one hand, that's not really the best measure of anything. Almost everyone breaks their campaign promises. On the other hand, not everyone breaks them with such frequency, regularity, and aplomb, we might as well add. Brian Klass writes this. We have 6 months, 182 days into his administration. Trump hasn't passed a single bill of 10 that he promised to pass in his first 100 days. And, of course, a reminder, Republicans control both houses of Congress, and it should not be difficult at all. So, on the one hand, we have Trump, who doesn't really have any grasp of how things work, making probably a very aggressive and very stupid promise to pass these 10 bills in the first 100 days without any idea of what it actually takes. On the other hand, if he were really organized and really had a congressional liaison team, really knew what he was doing, really had a cooperative Congress that likewise knew what it was doing, they might have been able to get some of this done, but they got zero. And he's illustrated it by reprinting what I guess is a page perhaps from the website, or maybe actually a piece of printed literature listing these things. It says right here, I will work with Congress to introduce the following broader legislative measures. This is obviously not his wording, but supposed to be his position, and fight for their passage within the first 100 days of my administration. And of course, those are listed here, and they are crossed out in red, virtual red ink, along with Brian's tweet. Here we have the Middle Class Tax Relief and Simplification Act. Of course, that's supposed to maybe sort of kind of come next, though it was entirely dependent on passing the Obamacare repeal bill, which they didn't get around to. But it's going beautifully. My bill is progressing through Congress wonderfully. It's really terrific. There's a description of the whole thing and what it was supposed to be doing. And, of course, they put titles on these things, so they're just prospective titles. You can't hold them accountable for the titles of the bills coming through. But anyway, the Middle Class Tax Relief and Simplification Act, nowhere near completion. I haven't even begun it. End the Offshoring Act. Well, no, haven't seen anything like that. And, in fact, of course, they're documenting all the offshoring of all the Trump products pretty thoroughly. Let's see, American Energy and Infrastructure Act, nope, hasn't happened, hasn't even begun, not even in the drafting stage. School Choice and Education Opportunity Act, hasn't even mentioned a word about education. There's been nothing about education. And thank God, it's a terrible idea, and it will, I'm sure, be a terrible bill, but interesting to note the failure of the record nonetheless. Repeal and Replace Obamacare Act, of course, we're all watching that fail in real time. The Affordable Child Care and Elder Care Act, nope. That was supposed to be maybe an Ivanka special. That, of course, has never even come close to happening. She's got no idea where they even do this work. So if she were heading up the task of getting that done, I'm not sure she would know where to go. By the way, here's an undercovered story for the first 180 days. I mean, obviously, the attention is rightly focused on so many other things, and Ivanka Trump isn't even the most important figure in her house in this administration. But has anybody gotten even an inkling from the newspapers, and I mean, it's not their fault. There's plenty of other things to cover, and she's not doing anything. That's the point. But guess what I'm asking. Are there any stories about what she's done? What does she do all day? Where does she go? I mean, she gets picked up. She's door-to-door, portal-to-portal protection, of course, and car service, which is, I always thought the chief reason she wanted the job was that she wanted the government to pick up the tab of providing her the kind of security she felt she deserved now as the daughter of the president. And and of course, the secure mobile devices. She wanted her father to be able to text her and chat with her and talk with her on the phone without creating a national security issue. She needed a secure encrypted phone, and she needed a government job to get that. Anyway, what does she do all day? Where does she go? We don't really know a whole lot about what Kushner does all day and where he goes and who he meets with, but they're trying to find out. No one's trying to find anything out about where Ivanka goes. And, I mean, can we say at last that we as fans of the show and as readers of the news have realized, I think, for a long time, that she really doesn't have anything like the influence that she was rumored to have. Remember those heady first couple weeks of the administration, during which time we were told that Ivanka and Jared Kushner would be the moderating influence. They would be keeping Trump on an even keel. They would talk him out of the most extreme things. They would be pushing for all sorts of moderating initiatives in an otherwise reactionary conservative regime, and we'll be taking care of the child care and elder care and women in the workplace and yada yada. I mean, there's literally, I don't know, maybe I've been ignoring it, and that's entirely possible. I've been focused on so many other different things that I haven't been reading much about it, but I don't even see crossing the transom. That means none of you were discussing it either. What does she do during the day? To what office does she report? Where does she spend her time? Who does she meet with? What's she working on? There's literally nothing. And you don't see her until Trump takes a foreign trip and she tags along to log the miles, or, I don't know what she does when she goes abroad. But anyway, it's clearly next to nothing, and we're wasting our time and money on having her hold this job. I know she's not getting paid, but we're spending plenty to keep her pampered and allow her to pretend to think she's involved in something. And it's really kind of sad. Anyway, back to the agenda he hasn't accomplished. Again, his list of, it says 10, and I haven't counted. You got to check the math with this guy. Are there really 10 bills even listed here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, there's 10. The screen cap doesn't have all of the descriptions of them in there, but I'm not even bothering with the descriptions. Who cares? They're not doing them. So let's see. We start off. There was the tax bill that he hasn't done, and the Offshoring Act, American Energy and Infrastructure, School Choice and Education Opportunity Act, bogus names, but it doesn't matter. They haven't done any of those. Number 5, the Repeal and Replace Obamacare Act. They've spent all their time on that and gotten nowhere. Affordable Child Care and Elder Care Act, the End Illegal Immigration Act. He's taken a lot of taken the initiative, let's say, in issuing so far mostly unconstitutional executive orders, but there's nothing by way of legislation moving on that. And then the last 3, Restoring Community Safety Act. Heard nothing about that. Restoring National Security Act. Of course, we've been undoing our national security by executive action, yes, but nothing on that front legislatively. And finally, the Clean Up Corruption in Washington Act, which is hopeless. There's no chance that you would. It would be deadly for him to even approach the subject at this point. But then again, I don't know. Maybe not. Nothing seems to be deadly that should be in all of this, but apparently suffering no damage among his base, although we'll check in on that and get some statistics on it when Greg returns to the show and we start taking a look back at the polling again. But I don't hope for any miracles. All right. What else have we got in store here? The articles are piling up even faster than I can get through them. I'm seeing new suggestions for more reading along the way. We should just turn to Pocket and scroll back in the Twitter feed and see what I have marked and retweeted and share some of these things. Armando, retweeted something from Mark Sumner that I think would be useful in quickly catching up with the news we haven't discussed since last Friday's show about the Donald Trump Jr. meeting in Trump Tower back in June, the Russia collusion meeting, where he took the meeting with the Russian lawyer and then also maybe sort of kind of a translator, but who turned out to be a counterintelligence agent. But then there was another translator, but then there was something wrong with that guy as well. And anyway, the attendance at the meeting now up to something like 8 people. And we were just on person 6 and 7, but over the weekend they actually solved who's the 8th person. And guess what? He's kind of wacky too. Where should we start with this? Why don't we start we'll start with Mark's summary, his tweet storm from this morning. And, of course, he's been doing some writing on it, too. And we'll throw in a couple of various articles to fill in bits and pieces along the way. Mark Sumner, Devil's Tower, of course, tweeting about Irakli, or sometimes known as by his anglicized nickname Ike. Ike Kavaladze is my best attempt at his last name, Kaveladze. He was identified finally as the 8th person in the Trump Tower meeting. I know I have to fill you in on who was 6 and 7 yet in all of this. And we have some articles about that. But we'll just jump right to the end because maybe that'll help us catch up on the rest of it. The 8th man at that Trump Tower meeting is more important than he might seem in defining what happened. Why would he be more important? Long story short, even before Mark gets to it, is Ike is one of the, I would say one of the, would we rather say godfathers or grandfathers in all this, of Russian money laundering in the United States. He's like one of the OG original gangster money launderers in the U.S. And he just, happened to find his way to this particular meeting with one of the people that they've used most frequently to do that laundering, the Trump family. So Mark puts it this way. In 2000, the year 2000, Kavaladze was part of a broad investigation into why it was too easy to launder money by creating shell companies. This is a good way of saving us some time. I could read you the whole articles, but Mark's going to sum it up. Kavaladze himself created over 2,000 shell companies. And we're talking about LLCs here. Once again, just to be clear about that, you know me from Twitter. I'm David Waldman, LLC. Kavaladze himself created over 2,000 shell companies that moved hundreds of millions of dollars. Afterwards, regulations were tightened. Basically, he got caught, and the whole scheme was kind of exposed, and there were congressional hearings and tightening of the regulations and the laws governing such things based on what Kavaladze was doing in the 90s and 2000s, early 2000s. That defined the money laundering, Russia to New York in particular, money laundering pipeline. At the same time, Mark continues, Trump was being investigated for money laundering through his casinos. Those regulations were also tightened. So again, simultaneous with Kavaladze's schemes laundering money through real estate, and Trump being in the real estate business, but not quite as heavily as he came into it later. Trump was busy laundering money, and very often for Russians and himself, at the casinos, which eventually collapsed. It became harder to move oligarch and mobster billions into the country using shell companies and casinos, thanks to the tightening of those regulations. So both men made a switch, and pretty much at the same time. The one area with rules still so lax they could handle those funds was real estate. And guess what Trump's original love really is? It's golf and eating. But in business-wise, he tends to claim that most of his fortune is made in real estate. Real estate became the go-to means of laundering money. That's how the meeting at Trump Tower ended up being between Trump Organization, Kushner Companies, Crocus Group, and Prevezon Holdings. Those are the real players at the meeting. I think Mark has it right. There are people there representing those interests, but the real players are the Trump Organization, the Kushner companies, the Crocus Group, and the Prevezon Holdings. Those 8 people were there to hold open the biggest, easiest remaining pipeline for cleaning up billions in dirty money. And that same pipeline is why Trump is so concerned that Robert Mueller might be looking into his personal, and that's in quotes there, finances. Yes, another threat levied at Mueller just the other day, really yesterday, that basically he's Trump now trying to lay the groundwork, at least among his base, no one else will buy into it, that he can, should, and will fire Robert Mueller as special counsel. We all know he can, and to date, no president has dared to do that. But they've come pretty close, of course. And then there was Nixon, who, of course, can't be discounted in all this. And by the way, his Trump's chief advisors, of course, old Nixon dirty tricksters. So that doesn't help build any confidence for anybody, unless, of course, the confidence is in the prediction that he'll fire the special prosecutor. But the specific threat this time was, and he's not without basis, I guess, in this, Trump saying special counsel investigations and independent prosecutors investigations in the past have the big complaint about them by their targets is that they have ended up ranging too far and going on an expedition looking for something related to what they're looking into that might also be crooked. And in some cases, they've ended up finding, entirely new cases against the people that they were supposedly investigating for something entirely different. This stuff is pretty well related, at least at this stage. But anyway, the threat is, if you begin looking at my personal finances and my family's finances, that'll be it for you. We'll finally, we'll have had enough and we'll fire you because you're ranging too far afield. But there's no way to conclude the Russia investigation without looking at how much money Trump personally made from dealing with Russia. Okay, so we'll see whether the threat goes anywhere. So that's the sort of 50,000-foot view summed up by Mark, who tweets, of course, and writes as well as Devil's Tower. Writes now as Mark Sumner, of course, at Daily Kos, in case you're looking to stop by and find what he's written up about that. Pardon me, but if Twitter is your thing, Devil's Tower is the name you're looking for. Okay, let's see. Other things that this is going to be a real crazy, hectic show, and I'm going to try and jump into enough articles to try and summarize where we are on the news. And a lot of it is going to be, I hope, aided by having put aside people's tweets where they're pointing to various articles that I think everybody should spend some time on, but making their main point in that tweet. We'll take advantage of that. Here's Daniel Schulman, Deputy D.C. Bureau Chief at Mother Jones, is how he identifies himself on Twitter. And he's got this to say in linking to his piece in Mother Jones. Before Trump Jr.'s meeting, the campaign embraced the story that the Kremlin was debating the release of thousands of Clinton emails. Just a little bit of context for taking the meeting that I think really puts the lie to the idea that there was anything other than collusion about hacking and what could be stolen through the hacking and passed on to the Trump campaign. The idea of their stupid cover story about, well, it's about sanctions, of course, so their cover story being adoption. That hardly even enters into it. At this stage of the game, the play was, if we give you the dirt you're looking for on Hillary Clinton, will there then be a quid pro quo? Can we later get those sanctions lifted? There's nothing a candidate can do about lifting sanctions, so it only makes sense that they're looking for a later payoff and all this. All right. What we've got here in Mother Jones, were Trump Jr., Manafort, and Kushner hoping to get Clinton's emails from Putin? I think everybody kind of knows that that's the case, but this summarizes and pulls things together. Oh, and it's a David Korn piece, too. It wasn't even Schulman who wrote it. He just tweeted about it. Before they met with a Russian lawyer, Trump's campaign promoted a report suggesting the Kremlin had them, those Clinton emails. David Korn reports. When Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and Paul Manafort were told in early June of 2016 that the Putin regime had dirt on Hillary Clinton and wanted to share the material secretly with them to help Donald Trump win the White House, they quickly moved forward with a meeting with a Russian go-between. Trump Jr.'s email at the time, I love it, suggests that Trump's top aides were keen to get their hands on any negative information the Russians had, but one possible reason for such eagerness might have been an online report that the Kremlin had somehow obtained Hillary Clinton's personal emails. Now, I don't remember that report. You might not remember that report. You feel like you heard about something kind of like that, but I think we got bits and pieces of it after the fact. To clarify, what Korn says here is that this was basically a rumor circulating among right-wing circles, driven mostly by the original fake news, the original bogus stories, sometimes crafted in Russia, sometimes crafted in Macedonia, and just sort of circulated among the Facebook networks of the alt-right and ultra-weird right that was supporting Trump at the time. And this is just basically one of those stories. Here's how he puts it. One possible reason for the eagerness might have been an online report that the Kremlin had somehow obtained those emails. At least one top Trump campaign official had embraced this story, and they were famous for embracing these fake stories, and circulated it on social media, even though the report, which was highlighted on Fox News and disseminated by a conservative website founded by Laura Ingraham, lacked any sources and was first posted on a pair of bizarre conspiracy sites, including one associated with neo-Nazis. Par for the course, but worth it recalling, I think, in all of this. This is what the news atmosphere among the top brass at the Trump campaign was really like. They loved reading whatever they thought, argued in their favor. And it didn't matter if it was totally baseless and being run by a conspiracy theory promoting neo-Nazi site. They didn't care about that. Clinton's emails were the holy grail of Clinton haters during the 2016 campaign after using a private email server as Secretary of State. And remember how they got to that. I mean, just by way of background, again, Benghazi happens. They're investigating. They find out about the private email server. The theory grows up around that among conservatives that surely this unusual and unsanctioned email practice was, obviously, because it was private and it wasn't run by the State Department, was obviously compromised and easily hackable, even though, as it turns out, the State Department stuff was mostly pretty much thoroughly hacked, and her email server, it's never been proven that there was any actual intrusion or any data lost to hacking. Everybody just figured, of course it would be the target for hackers. And it probably would have been if hackers knew to look for it. And part of the reason that I think those emails mostly remained secure was that nobody knew to look for them anywhere, because nobody had any idea until the Republicans spilled the beans that she was using a private email server. But anyway, still doesn't really solve the problem of whether or not someone should have been doing that. But that's how the whole theory came together. Benghazi happened. Clearly, it had to be Hillary Clinton's fault because they absolutely wanted it to be, because they knew that they'd be running against her. And everybody knew, Benghazi, that's a bad thing. We can pin it on her. And probably because something, and she used bad email, and probably they hacked it. And then the Benghazi terrorists read her email, and they knew that they could have a riot and kill people because she had just emailed everybody, don't do anything about Benghazi because I hate America. That was basically the theory they were working on there. Did it work out? No, it didn't. But that didn't stop them. So that's the context in which they're working at that point. After using private email server as Secretary of State, Clinton had been asked by the State Department to provide the agency copies of her emails related to her work at Foggy Bottom, of course, the State Department. Again, the theory here among conservatives was that there would be emails somewhere that said, kill everybody in Benghazi, I don't even care because America sucks. That's what they're looking for. And that's what conservatives wanted to get a hold of. And when they found out that they deleted things like, yeah, here's my credit card number, buy me that pair of shoes, thank you, personal assistant, take care of that, and P.S. I'm meeting Chelsea for lunch at this time at this restaurant. They delete all that stuff. No, secretly she definitely deleted the email where she ordered people murdered at Benghazi. If we could only get Russian hackers to find the originals, then we would have the evidence we need. Of course, that never existed, but whatever. So, as part of that process of being asked to turn over copies of her emails, her lawyers vetted all the emails from the private server, sent about 30,000 to the department, and destroyed another 30,000 that they deemed personal and unrelated to her stint as Secretary of State. And I know that sounds suspicious if you hate Hillary Clinton or whoever, and you're always going to wonder whether they didn't delete something that was incriminating and just claim it was about, a lunch date or whatever. You're open to that sort of criticism. It doesn't prove anything, but you're open to that sort of criticism. So, Trump and other Clinton antagonists, of course, denounced her for obliterating these emails, suggesting they contained evidence of assorted nefarious activities. Her foes also pushed the idea that hackers from Russia or other governments might have penetrated her server and swiped her emails, gaining all sorts of national security secrets and negative information. There was, of course, no evidence that any such hacks occurred. Trump often tweeted about Clinton's destroyed emails. He referred to them as missing, and most famously, of course, called on Moscow to hack Clinton to find those messages. Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. In the weeks before the meeting with the Russian emissary and the top Trump advisors, hope was burning brightly on the right that Russia somehow had obtained Clinton's personal emails and would release material that would ruin her campaign. That's what all this was about. A senior Trump aide was publicly spreading this tale, and another suggested he believed it, but this story was just crap cooked up by a conspiracy site. On May 6th, an article appeared on two sites, the European Union Times and whatdoesitmean.com, claiming the Kremlin was hotly debating whether or not to release tens of thousands of Clinton emails it supposedly possessed. Here's an excerpt from the crazy sites that reads, an intriguing Security Council, or SC, report circulating in the Kremlin today suggests that a war of words has broken out between the director of the Federal Security Service, the FSB, Alexander Bortnikov, and chairwoman of the Council of Federation, Valentina Matvienko, over the issue of releasing to the Western media tens of thousands of top-secret and classified emails obtained by the Foreign Intelligence Service, or SVR, from the private but unsecured, that's obviously not true, computer or email server belonging to former U.S. Secretary of State and present American presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. So in other words, it's like a Louise Mensch story about Reince Priebus being caught trying to flee the country, or being stopped by the marshal of the Supreme Court or whatever. The crazier stories that we see her circulating. And by the way, did I do everyone a service by raising a flag early on about Louise Mensch, or did you already all know that? I think there was a time there where there were a lot of people very hopeful about uncovering evidence that would finally dislodge, after like 10 days, Donald Trump from office, and she offered a lot of wishful thinking about that stuff. And some of the things that she's written about, some of the less spectacular things have borne out. But, of course, she used that as license to go very, very far afield in a lot of things. There was always something weird about the way she approached everything. So, hopefully I gave you a big enough grain of salt to figure that out early on. Anyway, that's just what it reminds me of. These fake stories are a lot like, the wishful thinking that she and others still print. Anyway, let's see. Oh, and there's a graphic involved here embedded in the middle showing the path that these fake news stories took to market, essentially. And by the way, in case anyone was wondering, yes, it was Laura Ingram's LifeZet site that was part of the conduit in all of this. We'll see if he describes it in narrative form. As the article continues here, the reports said that Russian intelligence had broken into the computer of an infamous hacker who uses the alias Guccifer. How do you like that? So the hackers had hacked into a hacker's computer to get what he had hacked out of Hillary Clinton's computer. I guess that was supposed to help distance the Russians somehow from Guccifer. This prodigious Romanian hacker, his real name was Marcel Lazar Lehel, Lehel. I didn't know his real name. Had been arrested in early 2014 and extradited to the United States. In May 2016, he pleaded guilty to 2 criminal charges and was later sentenced to 52 months in prison. In a May 4th, 2016 interview with Fox News, who else? Guccifer asserted he had penetrated Clinton's server, but there was no evidence he had done so. In 2013, he had hacked the email account of Sidney Blumenthal, a Clinton confidant. But of course, I think we learned later on that that was just a simple phishing scam to which Blumenthal unfortunately fell victim and gave away his password. It wasn't much of a hacking, but okay. These 2 sites claimed the Russians had stolen from Guccifer the Clinton emails that the hacker supposedly had swiped, and they provided supposed details of the ongoing debate within the Russian government on whether to pass the Clinton emails to media outlets that would reach the United States. Neither site was a credible source of information. Both were well-known promoters of wild conspiracy theories. In 2009, after the European Union Times posted a story claiming that President Barack Obama had ordered 200,000 troops to be redeployed to prepare for a civil war within the United States, the Southern Poverty Law Center investigated the site and discovered it was registered to the wife of a racist skinhead gang member. Her husband, according to the SPLC, was a former member of the neo-Nazi group National Alliance, who more recently had been active in Volksfront, a racist skinhead group. She told the SPLC that she was a white racialist, but that the site was registered to her only because she was providing web hosting for a European who lives abroad. That's what Europeans do. They live abroad. Snopes.com, the conspiracy theory busting site, has referred to whatdoesitmean.com, the other weirdo site in this, as a notorious conspiracy pushing outlet. It has debunked many of its claims, including posts noting that Clinton was seriously injured in a secret airplane crash and that a doctor who had leaked Clinton's medical records was found dead. This kind of stuff. Despite the questionable provenance of the Russia has Clinton email story, this blockbuster revelation soon was being disseminated by right-wing media. It appears to have started with Fox News. What a surprise. 3 days, although really, to go directly to Fox News is a little bit of a surprise. 3 days after these 2 sites posted the phony story, Andrew Napolitano, a former judge and regular commentator on Fox News, and a Trump favorite, by the way, appeared on Megyn Kelly's show on Fox. She's rehabilitated herself now, of course. And asserted that the Clinton email server controversy had become a perfect storm. He added, there's a debate going on in the Kremlin between the Foreign Ministry and the Intelligence Service about whether they should release the 20,000, they say, of Mrs. Clinton's emails that they have hacked into and received and stored. Other right-wing outlets jumped on this assertion. The next day, Gateway Pundit, one of the worst in terms of its credulousness too, published a post headlined, Report, Hillary's emails hacked by Russia, Kremlin deciding whether to release 20,000 stolen emails. It cited whatdoesitmean.com. On May 11th, LifeZet, a site started by conservative radio host and Trump champion Laura Ingraham, posted a story with this headline, Kremlin has Hillary's emails. Russia has 20,000 emails stolen from her secret home server. It asserted the Kremlin is considering whether or not to release some 20,000 hacked Clinton emails reportedly in its possession. Russian security services apparently obtained the emails as part of their investigation into the Romanian hacker Marcel Lazar. I think that's got those names reversed there. One of these 2 reports has them reversed anyway. Known as Guccifer, now in U.S. custody in relation to the Clinton email scandal. No, but okay. It did not refer to any sources for this information. The Post added that Napolitano had also said this on Fox. Many people are saying this. Many people are saying that. One person. That's many. 2 days later, You see how this is working. On May 13th, Front Page Mag, a site started by longtime conservative provocateur David Horowitz, reported thousands of emails from Hillary Clinton's private unsecured server, created while she served as Secretary of State, are reportedly in the possession of Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service. It linked to the European Union Times story. You see how this is beginning to proliferate. And by the way, the same ridiculous claim that was unsecured is just casually included in every report. Of course, it wasn't unsecured, but who cares, right? It wasn't official is what it means. It wasn't secured by the people who were supposed to be securing her emails. Granted, they are supposed to be doing that, but was it unsecured? No. Were they stolen? No. This fake news story was legitimized by the Trump campaign, and they launder fake news. That was their business during the campaign. As much as it has been Donald Trump's job on all these years to launder Russian money, now he's laundering Russian propaganda instead. On May 11th, Dan Scavino Jr., one of the easiest conduits in the campaign, the social media director of the Trump campaign, tweeted, "Kremlin has Hillary's emails. Russia has 20,000 emails stolen from her secret home server." He linked to the LifeZet article. I didn't make that up. LifeZet reported it, and LifeZet had sources. Their source was whatdoesitmean.com. Whatdoesitmean.com didn't have any sources, but all the rest of us had sources. You see? So this is May 11th. This is a month before the meeting with Donald Trump Jr. Dan Scavino says the Kremlin's got the emails. And here's a picture, it's embedded right in here is the tweet. It says what it says. Now it was official. I guess we should say quote unquote official. The Trump camp was spreading the false information. Scavino is, of course, now the White House director of social media. It's apparently not gotten in the way of his career advancement that he promoted this insane lie. A few days later, retired General Michael Flynn, then Trump's top national security advisor, posted a tweet suggesting that he too accepted the phony story, as he did with so many phony stories. Quote, "Count on Russia and China having her emails and unsecure calls." Unsecured, unsecure, whatever. Past tense, doesn't matter. That's what General Flynn had to say on May 15th. And Trump continued to issue tweets slamming Clinton for her, quote, missing emails. Meanwhile, Trump fans on Twitter and elsewhere pushed this story fiercely, with some calling on Putin to release the emails to end Clinton's campaign and save the United States. Joe the plumber, who was still alive, a conservative activist, you know all about that guy, who gained a fleeting moment of fame during the 2008 election, tweeted out a version of this. Conservative author Janie Johnson, whoever that is, tweeted, "Do it, Putin. Hillary's emails hacked by Russia. Kremlin deciding whether to release 20,000 stolen emails." Once again, there's no public indication. By the way, leave it to Trump to boost the number to 30,000 when he finally starts bragging about it. There's no public indication yet what Trump Jr., Kushner, and Manafort specifically hoped to receive from the Russians, but if they were aware of and believed these conspiracy theory reports regarding the Russians and Clinton's emails, real-life fake news that had been bolstered by right-wing media and Trump's own social media guru, then they probably would have been particularly excited to sit down with a Russian lawyer whom they were told was bearing derogatory material on Clinton. And by the way, among the Trump family, Donald Trump Jr. is, I guess short of Donald Trump himself, the most active in passing around ridiculous ultra-right-wing memes and conspiracy theories. So no surprise that he would be the most interested. In any event, following this meeting, Trump continued to make Clinton's emails a key campaign issue. Her personal emails, though, were never uncovered and used as ammo. This conspiracy theory was bunk. But there was actual skullduggery afoot. The Putin regime had managed to steal and exploit other emails to damage Clinton and help Trump. And as the Trump Jr. meeting now shows, Trump's advisors played a key role in that plot. Even though the Trump campaign had been told the Kremlin wanted to assist Trump secretly, Trump and his aides constantly denied the Russian assault on the election was happening and provided cover for Putin's covert operation. That was the real conspiracy. And a good quick end, thankfully, to that article. Very informative, but at least it didn't drag on too much longer because there's so much more to add to all this. But that's a good summary of why it would be, I think, rather ridiculous. You'd have to really bend over backwards to think that there was any possible alternative explanation for convening this meeting, particularly at the level that there was involvement from the campaign side in all of this. All right, there's more, and we have to jump around a little bit. This is an important point that we need to get on the record because he was at the meeting too. We already knew about Paul Manafort being there, but yesterday's discussion on Manafort became just a little more curious. I have a piece here, and I'm sure there's writing about it everywhere now, including at Daily Kos, but I grabbed this piece yesterday from Talking Points memo. Esme Cribb, I don't believe we've called that name before on the show, had this piece over at TPM Livewire. The New York Times was the original source on this. New York Times reporting that Manafort owed pro-Russia interests millions before joining the Trump team. And another, I thought, well-formulated tweet, again from Matt Iglesias, who's really been on fire these days, saying, yeah, so weird that a guy so many millions of dollars in debt to Russians or pro-Russian activists and who knows what to call them, pro-Russian activists, actors in the intelligence world and the political world, but owing them millions of dollars. He's millions of dollars in debt, and he agrees to work for free, allegedly, for the Trump campaign. What a generous thing to want to do. But that doesn't last very long. So here's the TPM write-up of it, which I hope is briefer than the entirety of the New York Times report. Paul Manafort owed millions of dollars to pro-Russia interests, that's a better way of putting it, before he became President Donald Trump's campaign manager last year, the New York Times reported late Wednesday. According to the Times report, which cited financial records filed in Cyprus. What? Cyprus? Who else has connections to... Okay. Filed in Cyprus in 2016. Manafort, who kept bank accounts in the low-tax jurisdiction, owed as much as, you'll be astounded by this number, $17 million to pro-Russia interests. Well, that's an awful lot of money to owe to anybody, of course. That raised eyebrows just because $17 million is a lot. But, of course, it probably raised more eyebrows because I feel like we've seen that number somewhere before. We'll get to it. Shell companies connected to you already know. You know where I'm going with it. Shell companies connected to Manafort's work, LLCs, what do you know, work for the now defunct pro-Russian Party of Regions, showed the money, according to the report. This would be in Ukraine, where he did some political consulting even before working for the Trump campaign. A spokesman for Manafort did not dispute the possibility that the debts existed. Thanks for not disputing that. But told the New York Times the records were stale and do not purport to reflect any current financial arrangements. Sure, not anymore. The spokesman, Jason Maloney, said that Manafort did not collude with the Russian government to influence the 2016 election. Maybe that might even actually be true in the sense that from his position, what he was doing couldn't be deemed activity to influence the election. He was running the election essentially from the Trump side. All right, whatever. It should just be taken as a bad blanket denial. Didn't collude, is not indebted to, as he says, Mr. Deripaska, we'll get some idea of who that is later, or the Party of Regions, nor was he at the time he began working for the Trump campaign. Oh, that's an interesting claim. Aluminum magnate, and it's not magnetic, aluminum, so I always found that term funny. Aluminum magnate Oleg Deripaska is a close ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin, according to the report. He alleged in 2015 that Manafort and his partners owed him $19 million in connection with a failed investment. Manafort left Trump's campaign in August of 2016, 4 months after he became campaign chairman, amid questions of his activities in Ukrainian politics. Remember, they had to jettison him because he was too closely connected to Ukrainian politics, and then it turned out that they were all directly connected to Russian politics. Oh well, another one under the bus. Sergei Leshchenko, a member of the Ukrainian parliament, in March alleged that Manafort received illegal payments while working as a consultant for the Party of Regions. This is the guy who was texting to Manafort's daughters? I think so. NBC News reported days later that Manafort closed several bank accounts with the Cyprus Popular Bank, not the Bank of Cyprus, but the Cyprus Popular Bank, years earlier, after it launched an internal investigation into possible, can you guess, money laundering. Manafort retroactively filed with the U.S. Justice Department under the Foreign Agents Registration Act in June. Manafort's filings revealed that his firm earned some money from the Party of Regions just over 2 years ago. Now, before I finish up here, can anybody guess what the amount of money he earned from the Party of Regions was? If you guessed $17 million, you seem to have miraculously put your finger on it. I don't know how you would have chosen that number out of thin air. But yeah, I guess essentially what's happening here is Paul Manafort owes $17 million to Russian-connected political actors / money launderers / mobsters, because they all are. That's the only way you get to be a prominent politician in that region, I think. He owes somebody, Russia-connected, $17 million, agrees to work for the Russian-favored candidate, Donald Trump, for free, and then gets paid $17 million by these same Russian-connected actors for some work done previously. Not at all anything connected to the work you just did for the candidate we wanted to see win the presidency in the United States, and that you did for free even though you're $17 million in debt. And besides which, none of this can be true because now you're not $17 million in debt. So all of that now goes away. You're not in debt. What are these people talking about? They're making up crap about this guy. Unbelievable. Fake news. Wow. Well, I just thought we should get that on record. I don't think I can connect that any further at the moment, but again, one of those things that really has to be on record. Other things that have to be on record. Geez, gosh, we got to get to everything. Here's another dot that's sort of hanging out there. Dana Rohrabacher, who is a disgusting, filthy pig, as it turns out. And I actually have proof of that. I have a source on that one, but we'll get to that in a minute. The more important point, not yet on the record, what we do know about Rohrabacher on the record is he, too, has had a very curious relationship with the Russians. And, of course, he was the guy called out by Kevin McCarthy as being, besides Trump, the only person that McCarthy thought was really honestly on Putin's payroll. And lots of stories, some of which we've touched on in the past and some of which we've missed, to suggest that he certainly had a very strangely close relationship with a lot of weirdo Russians and was making lots of trips to Russia, meeting with a lot of shady characters. This story, one place removed from him, although the webbing that connects this story to the rest of the stories is out there, and I know that you've been seeing it because at least one of you who has been listening to the show, and let's see, do I recall who made the comment? Yes, I do. Here it is. It's prominently stored for me. It's well, let me bring it up here. How can I get this here? A little bit of a slow computer issue here. I know I have this up at the top of my column if I can just get it, but for whatever reason my column has disappeared here. There we go. Okay, so I've recovered my tweet deck so that I can find my direct messages. There it is, right up at the top, as I recall. Our good friend Travis Rosen from Irreverent Testimony podcast and a frequent, has been a guest on the show and a frequent correspondent, had sent me this. And I should have counted on this being having TweetDeck open necessary. He sent me this unrelated article about Dana Rohrabacher. I think it's unrelated. I don't know, but just kind of a funny aside about his personal habits. And then as we were having the chat back and forth about how weird Rohrabacher is, he had just sort of thrown out there, for a guy who was this, dirty physically, but also dirty in corruption-wise, how could this guy not be in Trump's cabinet? He seems like a perfect fit for the Trump cabinet. And the answer is the Russians needed to keep him at his perch at the Foreign Relations Committee in the House. He's extraordinarily valuable to them from that spot. Let's see. And the story that brings that to mind is that one of Rohrabacher's top aides has been fired from the committee. So that's a pretty important development as well. Oh, slow computer once again in terms of bringing this stuff up. But Rohrabacher is a pretty senior Republican on the Foreign Relations Committee and, of course, would make a great asset to Russians and has done a great job for them in trying to help obfuscate the sanctions issue, to conflate it with the adoption issue, and to try to get the Magnitsky Act repealed or at least renamed, which seems like an awfully petty thing to be after. But anyway, so it was Travis that had asked me that, and I guess that's part of the answer. So who is this guy that's now in trouble? The Daily Beast has this brief report and some stories linked here that we should dig into. GOP aide Paul Behrens, Behrens, ousted after Russia links exposed. Illustrated by a photo of the execrable Dana Rohrabacher here. Paul Behrens, who was a top aide to Dana Rohrabacher, no longer works as staff director for the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee. Which subcommittee? I don't know. But I guess it's whichever one Rohrabacher chairs. We should look that up. I don't think I know that offhand. Let's see. House Foreign Relations Committee, House Foreign Affairs Committee, members. Rohrabacher is the 4th ranking member currently, and we should probably take a look and see which subcommittee he chairs. Let's see. There he is. What do you know? Europe, Eurasia, and Emerging Threats. What a fantastic place to keep him if you are his Russian handlers. So he handles the Europe, Eurasia, and Emerging Threats. And what an interesting third category to throw in there. Subcommittee. And so Rohrabacher got to staff that subcommittee, including putting this Paul Behrens guy at the top position for the subcommittee. And now he's out, after stories at the Daily Beast and the Atlantic examined his relationship with pro-Kremlin figures. A spokesman for Rohrabacher told the Daily Beast just 24 hours earlier that there was nothing unusual about Behrens coordinating with pro-Russian voices. But by Wednesday night, a House Foreign Affairs Committee spokesperson, the full committee, had told the Atlantic Paul Behrens no longer works at the committee. And that was that. And that's the end of that report. But we'll have to take a look at some of the linked reporting in the Daily Beast and the Atlantic to get a fuller accounting of that. But again, that was their attempt, I guess, on behalf of Paul Behrens to try out the "there's nothing wrong with collusion anyway" line. As you know, the defenses have evolved. I don't know what you're talking about. There was no collusion. Okay, there was collusion, but if so, it wasn't illegal. And not only that, it should be legal. It should be required. Why wouldn't you want to collude? You'd have to be an idiot not to. Of course, we did it, and it was never wrong in the first place. And P.S., we didn't do it, in case that helps. So let's see. What does the Daily Beast have to say about Paul Behrens? GOP lawmaker got direction from Moscow, took it back to D.C. One of the stories we didn't include in yesterday's roundup about Dana Rohrabacher. After being given a secret document by officials in Moscow, Representative Dana Rohrabacher sought to alter the sanctions legislation and tried to set up a virtual show trial on Capitol Hill. I did hear about this when we didn't get to read it. Nico Hines reporting on this. Members of the team of Russians who secured a June 2016 Trump Tower meeting with Donald Trump and Jared Kushner here's our connection here, also attempted to stage a show trial of the anti-Putin campaigner Bill Browder on Capitol Hill. We did mention him at the end of last week, didn't we? The trial, which would have come in the form of a congressional hearing, was scheduled for mid-June of 2016. What do you know? by Representative Dana Rohrabacher, a long-standing Russia ally who chairs the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on Europe. During the hearing, Rohrabacher had planned to confront Browder with a feature-length pro-Kremlin propaganda movie that, we know about this one, that viciously attacks him, as well as at least 2 witnesses linked to the Russian authorities, including lawyer Natalia Veselnitskaya. What do you know? Ultimately, the hearing was canceled when senior Republicans intervened and agreed to allow a hearing on Russia at the full committee level with a Moscow sympathetic witness, according to multiple congressional aides. They just couldn't take Rohrabacher's freelancing on behalf of the Russians here. An email reviewed by the Daily Beast shows that before that June 14th hearing, Rohrabacher's staff received pro-Kremlin briefings against Browder, once Russia's biggest foreign investor, and his tax attorney, Sergei Magnitsky, from a lawyer who was working with Veselnitskaya. What do you know? Another lawyer, besides Veselnitskaya. Although House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Ed Royce of California had prohibited Rohrabacher from showing the Russian propaganda film in Congress, Rohrabacher's Capitol Hill office still actively promoted the screening of the movie that was held at the museum, which we knew about, on June 13th. Veselnitskaya was one of those handling the movie's worldwide promotion. Invitations to attend the movie screening were sent from the subcommittee office by Catherine O'Neill, a Republican intern on Rohrabacher's committee. Her email promised that the movie would convince viewers that Magnitsky, who was murdered in a Russian prison cell, was no hero. The invite, reviewed by the Daily Beast, claimed the film explodes the common view that Mr. Magnitsky was a whistleblower and lavishes praise on the rebel director Andrei Nekrasov. That invitation was not from our office. O'Neill was an unpaid intern on the committee staff. Paul denies asking her to send the invitation, said Ken Grubbs, Rohrabacher's press secretary, referring, of course, to the congressman's staff director, Paul Behrens. Oh, I had nothing to do with this, except you're fired. O'Neill went on to secure a job on the Trump transition team, curiously enough, intern to Trump transition team. And then, in the State Department's Office of the Undersecretary for Civilian Security, Democracy, and Human Rights, ironically enough, she did not return a call for comment. I mean, we forget how many dirty actors are tucked away inside the government by the Trump transition team. Just because we've prevented a number of Senate-confirmed offices from being filled doesn't mean that we haven't seen the Trump team embed their operatives at the lower levels inside a lot of these departments. I mean, there's hardly anybody working at the State Department, but they made room for Catherine O'Neill. Rohrabacher's office was given the film by the Prosecutor General's office in Moscow, which is run by, you'll remember from last week, Yuri Chaika, a close associate of President Vladimir Putin, who is accused of widespread corruption, and Viktor Grin, the Deputy General Prosecutor, who has been sanctioned by the United States as part of the Magnitsky Act. That same Prosecutor General's office, again, we're talking about basically the equivalent of the Attorney General of the United States, the Russian Attorney General, implicated in most of this stuff, and actually his deputy personally sanctioned by the Magnitsky Act. Wow. We're getting to that level eventually. That same Prosecutor General's office was also listed as being behind the very high level and sensitive information that was offered to Donald Trump Jr. in that email, prior to his now infamous meeting with Russian officials at Trump Tower on June 9th, just days before the congressional hearing. Veselnitskaya attended that meeting with Trump Jr. She also happens to have worked as a prosecutor in the Moscow region and is a close personal friend of Chaika's. The Daily Beast reviewed a copy of a document that was passed to Rohrabacher in Moscow in April of 2016. The document, marked confidential, was given to Rohrabacher and Behrens. It lays out an alternate reality in which the U.S. and the rest of the world has been duped by a fake $230 million scandal that resulted in sanctions being imposed on 44 Russians linked to murder, corruption, and cover-ups. The document, which was handed over by an official from the Prosecutor General's office to Rohrabacher, along with means of viewing the Russian propaganda movie, suggested that the U.S. political situation may change the current climate, and claimed that it was an ideal moment to foment a challenge to the Western narrative on Putin's kleptocracy. They probably didn't use the word kleptocracy, but We're safe in doing so. For the time being, anyway, a subcommittee hearing that would re-examine the sanctions placed on Russia, the paper claimed, would be appreciated in Moscow. Changing attitudes to the Magnitsky story in the Congress could have a very favorable response from the Russian side, the document said. That was a little Transylvanian accent there, unfortunately. Maybe. Who even knows whether there is such an accent? It's a fictional story, Dracula. Anyway, what the U.S. would get in exchange for holding a subcommittee hearing was not laid out in detail, but the document promised to help iron out key controversial issues and disagreements with the United States. And for some reason, they thought adoption would be at least a fantastic cover story for it. What we were supposed to get from lifting the sanctions, I really don't know. Nothing. Probably just money to the people who engineered it. There was no benefit to the United States. Grubbs said Rohrabacher had accepted the document, but said the conversation with officials from the Prosecutor General's office during the Congressman's April 2016 Moscow visit was brief and formal. When Rohrabacher returned to the United States, he delayed the passage of the Global Magnitsky Act by holding it up in committee and tabled an amendment to remove Magnitsky's name from its title, citing several of the claims found in the Russian document. That's either the wrong use of the term of art tabled or a very confusing element to the story. If he tabled an amendment to remove Magnitsky's name by congressional parlance, that would mean he basically killed the amendment. I think they mean he put it on the table for consideration, not the term of art tabling the amendment. Anyway, next, Rohrabacher and Behrens, with the help of Rinat Akhmetshin, you remember him, a Soviet Army veteran and lobbyist who was also present at the June 9th meeting in Trump Tower, put together a subcommittee event with witnesses including Veselnitskaya and Nekrasov, the director of the movie. When Royce, the chair of the full committee, got wind of the hearing, he nixed Rohrabacher's plan and offered instead to hold a full committee hearing on Russian relations. House aides conceded that he did so in part to avoid Rohrabacher staging an event that could have embarrassed the Republican Party and Congress. Rohrabacher was still apparently allowed to propose a witness for the full committee hearing who shared some of his pro-Russia views, Jack Matlock. The former U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union, who appeared, confirmed to the Daily Beast that he had been first approached by Rohrabacher. A spokesman for Royce said that while Matlock and Rohrabacher did know each other from their days in the Ronald Reagan administration, his appearance at the hearing was ultimately cleared by the full committee's Republican staff. During Royce's hearing, Rohrabacher approvingly compared Donald Trump to Vladimir Putin. The congressman also submitted for the congressional record testimony that claimed Russia had not been behind the radioactive poisoning of former FSB officer Alexander Litvinenko in London. Separate story, but interesting. Rohrabacher, Behrens, Akhmetshin, Veselnitskaya, and Matlock had dinner together later that night at the Capitol Hill Club, a private members' establishment for Republicans. The evening was organized by Lanny Wiles, a veteran GOP operative. Some more dots to connect here. The following day, House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy was caught on tape, telling Republican colleagues, there's two people I think Putin pays. Remember, Rohrabacher and Trump. When some of the lawmakers laughed, he replied, swear to God. McCarthy later said the comment was meant as a joke. A close associate told the Daily Beast that McCarthy was indeed referencing Rohrabacher's well-known affinity for Russia, which, over the years, has been treated as an odd spectacle. And how else would you treat it? By fellow lawmakers on the Hill. Now, of course, it's deeply suspicious, but at that point it was probably just odd spectacle. Whether they should take the spectacle more soberly is another matter. 4 years prior to the hearing, Rohrabacher was taken into a quiet room in Congress and warned by FBI agents that Russian intelligence operatives were trying to recruit him as an asset. If he took the warning seriously, it certainly didn't stop him from spending time with figures linked closely to the Russian state apparatus. Earlier this year, Rohrabacher, who says he once arm-wrestled Putin, yeah, he says it, met Akhmetshin in Berlin. The congressman acknowledged to CNN that he suspected the former member of a Soviet counterintelligence unit might have links to the current Russian security service. I would certainly not rule that out, Rohrabacher said. He has an ulterior motive. I think he probably thinks it's possible, I should say, that he thinks he's playing them. Who knows? The meeting in Germany apparently came about through sheer happenstance. Golly, that's weird. The same cannot be said of Rohrabacher's congressional delegation trip to Moscow in the spring of 2016. The itinerary for that 3-day trip, reviewed by the Daily Beast, shows that Rohrabacher and Behrens attended a side meeting without the other members of the delegation, with one of Putin's closest confidants, Vladimir Yakunin, the former head of the Russian railways, who has been sanctioned by the U.S. Yakunin has routinely accompanied Putin on domestic and international trips over the years. He owns a dacha near the president in an exclusive enclave on the shore of, Lake Komsomolskoye. Oh, is that like the youth communist camp, right? The Komsomol, wasn't that the Communist Youth League back in the Soviet days? Rohrabacher said at the time that he had agreed to the meeting at the request of Sergei Kislyak, the Russian ambassador. Remember him? Oh, no one does. Don't worry if you don't. The Russian ambassador asked me if I would meet with him in Moscow, he told BuzzFeed. Kislyak has since gained notoriety in the U.S. after a series of Trump campaign associates failed to disclose their conversations with a man who has been described as a top spy and recruiter of spies. There were no other, imagine in the FBI, if they cared about things, I guess not in the New York field office, which we have more to discuss about, of course. But imagine in the FBI in the counterintelligence division, imagine pulling Rohrabacher aside and saying, be careful, the Russians are trying to recruit you as an asset. Oh, thanks for the warning. And then he goes and arranges a trip to Moscow and a meeting with the Russians' top spy, Kislyak. They must be like, this guy obviously wants to be recruited as an asset. There were no other meetings with Russian officials scheduled for Rohrabacher and Behrens alone, but after a delegation meeting with Konstantin Kosachev, chairman of Russia's Foreign Affairs Committee at the Duma, the two of them were asked to stay behind. Once the other members of the delegation had left the room, Viktor Grin, a top Chaika deputy in the Prosecutor General's office and one of the 44 Russians enduring a travel ban and asset freezes under U.S. sanctions, appeared with the document outlining Russia's position on the Magnitsky sanctions. Rohrabacher and Behrens were also given access to the anti-Magnitsky movie. By the way, just to pause here, I think this is inherent in what we've been discussing about sanctions, but I think this makes the point more explicitly and clearly. Remember here, it's not just a generalized pro-Russia stance by Russian oligarchs. They're obviously going to have a pro-Russian stance that they're taking on sanctions. All of what we've learned about the way they're laundering money, that they're stealing money in Russia, laundering it into American dollars by buying real estate with it, by buying Trump Tower condos and the like, Trump Soho condos and other condos in New York and Florida and probably elsewhere, so that they can have assets that they can, one, escape to if necessary, or two, sell for hard currency American dollars and keep them relatively clean versus the stolen Russian rubles. The whole scheme is about having access to piles and piles of clean American money and assets that they can trade for clean American money. And the sanctions that we're talking about is targeting individuals who we know have done this, have stolen Russian funds and laundered it into American real estate and freezing those assets. That's the sanction. You can't come to the United States and live in this luxury condo in a Trump building, and you can't sell it either because we've frozen the asset. All the work that they've been doing to launder the Russian money that they've stolen into American dollars is wasted effort because that's what the sanctions are targeting. The sanctions say, you don't own this condo. You don't have access to this money. You can't come here and hide in it. You can't sell it and keep the money. The money you stole and squirreled away in the United States is gone. That's why they hate the sanctions so much. That's why they need the sanctions lifted. It's a personal issue for them. It's not just, hey, we don't like you sanctioning our countrymen, and we're working on behalf of Russia and Russian citizens. It's us personally. We lost money and we want it back. And who else would be more apt to give it back to them than A, the guy who sold it to him, and B, loves money more than his own country, Donald Trump. That's what this is all about. This begins to make more sense. A month after returning from Moscow with the Russian document, which is just over a page long, the congressman had already delayed the global Magnitsky Act. I got to pause here for a second to tell you that, if you're listening on podcast, you won't have noticed this, but Justice just tells me, curiously enough, that my signal just dropped temporarily, but is now back on. What do we make of that? But for those of you listening live, you may have missed the connective web here, and so I'll just reiterate it one more time. Those of you listening on podcast, blank out for a second. But we're just pointing out here that the reason that the Russians are so interested in seeing the sanctions lifted, it isn't a matter of Russians representing the interests of Russia and Russian citizens, and hey, it bothers us that we're sanctioned or that our fellow countrymen are sanctioned in some vague, inchoate form. The sanctions include travel ban to the United States and asset forfeiture, essentially, which, is another subject we could spend an awful lot of time on. But freezing the assets of these sanctioned individuals in the United States, all the work that they've been doing as kleptocratic oligarchs has been stealing money from the Russian government or whoever in Russia and laundering it into clean American dollars by buying American real estate with it, in the hopes either that they can one day, when they fall out of Putin's favor, escape to the United States and live in a luxury condo in Trump Tower, or if that never happens to them and it never comes to pass, they never need to escape, they can always sell off that asset in exchange for $1 million in untraceable American cash. That's been the plan. Steal money from Russia, launder it through bank accounts and LLCs and whatnot, and then turn it into Trump Tower or Trump-related real estate, and not necessarily always Trump-related, and then either live there and or sell it later for American cash. The sanctions that we just refer to in the abstract, the sanctions are just that. The United States government saying, no, you don't own that condo. We are going to take it. You can't sell it for cash. We'll keep that cash. You can't come to the United States and hide in that condo. You're not allowed in. You personally. Not every Russian. It's not a travel ban on Russia. It's people we have reason to believe are guilty of human rights violations and international financial crimes, etc., human trafficking, what have you. Whatever it is we've identified about what you do, we don't allow you in the United States. You can't hide in your condo, and you can't sell that condo and keep the money because we'll take it. That's why they're so offended by the sanctions. And because it's so deeply personal to them, they continue to pursue these things. And, of course, they need a cover story. They don't want to discuss even sanctions raises eyebrows. And it should. And more people should be thinking about this. And this is, I think, an important point for discussion as between us and as between you and anybody else with whom you might be discussing the sanctions. The sanctions are very specific. You, kleptocrat oligarch, you can't come into this country. You can't sell off the assets you think you own. You parted with your money, your stolen money, in order to buy ownership of this condo, but you're not going to get it. That's what the sanction is. The money's gone, and we're keeping it. That's why they need those sanctions lifted. That's why the continued full court press to get that stuff listed and to get this Magnitsky Act lifted as well. So, continuing on here, there was the trip to Moscow by Rohrabacher and his aides, including Barron's. A month after returning from Moscow with this Russian document, which is just over a page long, the congressman had already delayed the global Magnitsky Act. His spokesman told National Review at the time, the congressman came across some information that puts the Magnitsky narrative as we know it into some question, and he wants to pursue it. Who cares It didn't really have that much to do, from his perspective, with Magnitsky. It was just, I want to stop the sanctions because the oligarchs who control billions of dollars and could give some of those billions of dollars to me are losing their opportunity to pay me off because the Magnitsky Act will swipe away a good portion of that. Now, if he were really smart, they swipe away a good portion of those ill-gotten gains. If he were really smart, I was going to say, or if we had the flexibility to be kleptocratic oligarchs in this country the way they do in Russia, Rohrabacher could just manipulate the American government to the extent that they will go ahead and impose those sanctions and seize those assets and then just convert them into Rohrabacher's personal assets. But we don't have a mechanism for doing it quite that way in this country. Anyway, Rohrabacher refused to say where this new information about the Magnitsky Act had come from. 2 weeks later, after returning from 2 weeks after this, I guess he's a month back from Moscow. Then 2 weeks later, Rohrabacher explained to colleagues on the House Foreign Affairs Committee why he had tabled an amendment, again, I used the table, to take Magnitsky's name off the bill. Maybe this will clear it up. If we do assume that they know what they're talking about and that tabling the amendment to take Magnitsky's name off the bill is killing the amendment to take Magnitsky's name off the bill. He did not say he was using the Russian document as the basis for his argument, but he did repeat 5 claims from the Moscow paper. It's a page long, and he cites it 5 times. He said Magnitsky was a financial advisor, not a lawyer, that Browder may have been trying to avoid millions in taxes, and that Browder had renounced his U.S. citizenship as a tax-saving measure, all of which may be true, although I think it was pretty well established that Magnitsky was a lawyer. Rohrabacher also advocated for an end to sanctions against Russia, or in particular, I would say, probably be clearer to say end sanctions against particular Russians who were extraordinarily wealthy so that they could have their money back, as a means of ending the ban on Americans adopting Russian orphans, which again, really honestly, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's nice, but it was, I was going to say, I don't want to dismiss it in terms of like, who cares? Because lots of people care. But was it really an issue that was that high on the agenda as between the U.S. and Russia? They came up with it, and it's a nice cover story and all, but it's not something that I knew a great number of Americans who were concerned about it. Anyway, this ban, of course, Putin had put into effect as a response to the original Magnitsky Act. In reality, Magnitsky reported the $230 million tax fraud to the authorities in 2008, shortly before he was detained. According to an investigation ordered by the former president, Dmitry Medvedev, Magnitsky was then held illegally, beaten, and left to die in his pretrial jail cell in 2009. Rohrabacher's working to protect that. As he pitched for support in the weeks after returning from Russia, Rinat Akhmetshin set to work on lobbying House members. A U.S. congressional staffer told the Daily Beast that former California Representative Ron Dellums and Akhmetshin, we've seen that pairing before, showed up at their office without an appointment. They said they were lobbying on behalf of a Russian company called Previzon, which would just be radioactive now, and asked us to delay the global Magnitsky Act or at least remove Magnitsky from the name, the staffer said. Mr. Dellum said it was a shame that this bill made it so Russian orphans cannot be adopted by Americans. No, it didn't. That was Putin who made it so that Russian orphans can't be adopted by Americans. Previzon's lawyer at the time was Natalia Veselnitskaya, who was working to defend the Cyprus-based company against U.S. money laundering allegations related to the massive fraud uncovered by Magnitsky. Several people on the Hill reported seeing Akhmetshin and Dellums being given highly unusual personal introductions to lawmakers. The man leading them around was Paul Behrens. Ken Grubbs insisted that Behrens often escorted people around Congress. Maybe. Behrens first worked for Rohrabacher in his office more than 25 years ago. In 1990, when he was a foreign policy advisor, he met a disaffected former Naval Academy student named Eric Prince at a series of conservative functions. They got on well, and Prince was invited to come and work in their office as an intern. After leaving Rohrabacher's office, you, of course, all recognize Prince's name. Prince joined the Navy SEALs before setting up a private military company called Blackwater in 1997. At the height of Blackwater's notoriety, after 14 civilians were unlawfully killed in Iraq, Behrens, who was by then a lobbyist, did work for the company, for which his firm was reportedly paid $300,000 a year. Rohrabacher also did his share of advocacy for his former intern. Prince is on his way to being an American hero, just like Ollie North was. He said in 2007, after a House investigation raised concerns about Blackwater's conduct. Behrens, who would later return to the more modestly remunerated world of public service, Prince and Rohrabacher have remained close for years, in part because their paths continue to cross. More recently, Prince has been described as an informal advisor to the Trump team. He was a regular guest on Stephen Bannon's Breitbart satellite radio show before Bannon joined the White House as chief strategist to the president. Prince also donated $250,000 in total to the Trump campaign. And one of the pro-Trump super PACs, his sister, Betsy DeVos, is Trump's education secretary. Wow. In April, the Washington Post reported that Prince had arranged to meet a Russian official in the Seychelles. Remember that story? The newspaper reported that the FBI was probing allegations that the meeting was part of an effort to establish a direct communications back channel between Trump and Moscow. He should have just gone to the G20 and said, "You want to sit and talk?" Like his old boss had done with his hearing gambit 6 months earlier, Prince stood accused of privately doing Russia's bidding. As Rohrabacher's plan to hold that extraordinary June hearing with strong pro-Russian views developed, Andrei Nekrasov, who directed the anti-Magnitsky movie, said Behrens reached out to him to testify. Veselnitskaya was also approached, although that must not have been in English, I guess. It was Rohrabacher who put in the call to his old friend Matlock. He and I share a view on the importance of getting along with the other nuclear power, Matlock told the Daily Beast. He asked me if I was willing to come to Washington, and he was going to set up hearings at his subcommittee. Rohrabacher did have a number of Russians who had done a film about the case in Moscow that had inspired the Magnitsky Act in Congress, and they found that the story that was being pervaded here, and that's an odd usage, by Browder and his people was not the accurate one, Matlock added. I don't know who's right about that, but I do believe it's wrong to suppress evidence. Matlock didn't need to worry. Rohrabacher's staff promoted the movie's screening at the museum, which was attended by Akhmetshin and Veselnitskaya, and the congressman from California entered a detailed statement from the director into the congressional record. For Rohrabacher's proposed hearing to be a success, Magnitsky skeptics needed the opportunity to challenge Browder directly, and on May 27, 2016, Behrens emailed Browder inviting him to be a witness. 2 weeks earlier, Behrens had been briefed on evidence gathered by the Russian authorities to tarnish Browder's reputation, according to an email reviewed by the Daily Beast. Here, basically, let me just stop and say, for those of us who have had our eye on how bad it would be for a American presidential campaign to accept information directly from Russian intelligence, let's just point out that the chief of staff of the subcommittee on Europe in the House Foreign Relations Committee is doing the same thing, now accepting information directly from Russian intelligence aimed at tarnishing the reputation of at least a former American citizen who allegedly brought to light this massive corruption scheme to steal and launder $230 million. But okay, whatever. Because he's not the president of the United States, we're looking the other way. But honestly, you can't have the chief of staff of the subcommittee on Europe and emerging threats, Europe, Eurasia, and emerging threats, running his operation and setting the agenda of the subcommittee based on dictation he's taking from Russian intelligence. That's a big deal. The email that the Daily Beast reviewed that alleged all this was from Mark Simrot, C-Y-M-R-O-T, to Behrens, a lawyer who was working for Prevezon at the time, just like Veselnitskaya. Is Mark Simrot the lawyer working for Prevezon? I guess so. Prevezon was facing a money laundering trial in New York that alleged the company's Russian owner had profited from the fraud Magnitsky had uncovered. The email from Simrot refers to a telephone call the day before. and includes evidence and court papers to back up the Kremlin's story that Browder was the one breaking financial laws in Russia. And that could all be true, by the way. We should throw that out. Probably everybody was breaking financial laws in Russia. When the Royce hearing did roll around on June 14th, one of the members of Congress on the committee was appalled by the litany of Kremlin lines being repeated by Rohrabacher and his friend Ambassador Matlock. I thought I'd just heard a presentation from RT. Representative Jerry Connolly of Virginia told the Daily Beast, referring to the Kremlin-funded English-language TV network. Connolly said the rest of the committee had come to believe that evidence from a Russian source should be treated with considerable skepticism, as the country's operatives are experts at disinformation and falsification of evidence. He was alarmed to discover that barons had been taking briefings direct from Russia's anti-Magnitsky operation. If that is corroborated, it is deeply disturbing, Connolly said. We are United States congressmen. Our job is to protect the interests of our country and our allies, not to collude with, excuse, dismiss, or even worse, collaborate with a foreign adversary and its minions. That is, hey, that's right. Hey, by the way, Sam Stein contributed additional reporting to this particular story. I guess after having moved on from HuffPost, remarkable reporting there and not really getting enough attention. There's, of course, the accompanying piece in The Atlantic, which would just about, I think, eat up the rest of the show if we read through it. But I think I had this one in the queue yesterday and didn't get to it. Rosie Gray reporting for The Atlantic. I'll just give you the headline and subheader. Russian anti-sanctions campaign turned to California Congressman. Rohrabacher, obviously. U.S. diplomats were concerned about Russian outreach to House Republican Dana Rohrabacher while on a trip to Moscow last year. And, of course, the concern continued afterwards. And now we have evidence that the chief of staff of his subcommittee was basically just taking his briefings from Russian intelligence and putting that as part of just making that part of the congressional record. It's pretty blatant. Not good, as Trump himself might have said. All right. I promised you this side trip on Rohrabacher that Travis has sent me. And again, here I'm not sure how much time we want to spend on something like this, but I thought it was interesting. And it might not tell us anything about the collusion story, but I don't know. Maybe it will. Maybe we can make something up out of this that helps us explain any of these crazy things he's doing. This is an old article from 2013, December of 2013. Dana Rohrabacher is dirty, and you're supposed to think, of course, that he's corrupt. He is, but that's not what this is about. R. Scott Moxley reporting for OC Weekly, and I think we're talking about Orange County, California Weekly. Weird story. He's talking about physically dirty Dana Rohrabacher, or at least his surroundings are. This is weird, and it's illustrated by some disgusting pictures of his home or apartment or whatever in California. When Congressman Dana Tyrone Rohrabacher, I didn't know that about him, Tyrone, moved into a 4-bedroom, 4-bathroom, $1 million Costa Mesa rental home on April Fool's Day, of all times, of 2010, the immaculate 6,300 square foot property could have been featured in a glossy real estate magazine. Built in 1948, the 2-story Orange Avenue home had been updated in recent years for comfort and style. The carpeting was new, appliances worked, that's nice to know, and the walls were spotless, you would hope. Thriving flowers, plants, and grass adorned the idyllic backyard less than 4 miles from the Pacific Ocean. But it's now understandable why Orange County's senior career politician secretly changed the locks and refused to allow homeowner Robert Poliniak, Polyniak, inside for annual inspections. How do you get away with that? The owner can't get in. When he moved out in August of 2012, Rohrabacher left behind a shockingly horrific pigsty, a dump worse than a college fraternity house of unhygienic slobs unfamiliar with the most basic tools of cleaning. You already said fraternity house. Why gild the lily? Darlene Witzel, Polyniak's longtime girlfriend, entered the home shortly after the congressman's departure and wept at the scene. It was disgusting, she said. It was unbelievable. Who lives like that? Massive black stains and muck covered the carpet throughout the home. Sticky grime encased damaged, rusted appliances. Denied water, once thriving outside plants and grass dried up and died. Blinds were cracked. Black Dirt ruined the appearance of once sparkling tile floors. Walls inexplicably contained odd holes, nail polish, wax, and some smelly substance that may have been feces. Every toilet seat in the house was broken. The ceilings showed smoke damage. Light switches had been cracked. Clumps of hair and remnants of what may have been balloons or some other rubbery material. Clogged sinks. Cracks scarred doors. Thick solidified grease rendered the air suction vent above the kitchen stove useless. Bathroom towel bars were missing and vanities suffered water damage. A second floor suite used by Dana's wife, Rhonda, as her bedroom. Interesting. What? Okay, whatever. Contained a huge, mysterious, lubricant-like stain, something you might expect on the floor of a Hollywood sex club. I wouldn't expect to know what's on the floor there, but okay. That had seeped through thick carpet and padding to tarnish a hardwood floor. The dishwasher wasn't functioning. Seems like the least of the worries. A wooden chair in the backyard had been crushed, and phone lines were strangely severed. An overflowing tub cracked the ceiling with water damage. It's like a meth house at this point. And no joke, white maggots squirmed underneath a kitchen stove that may not have ever been cleaned during Rohrabacher's $3,350 per month occupancy, which was secured in part with character references from fellow OC Congressman Ed Royce, the chairman of his committee, after all, John Campbell, and Ken Calvert, who's also no gem and has been caught with prostitutes in the past. But hey, never mind that. People have their needs, you know. Paid invoices show the widespread damages totaled more than $25,800. According to records reviewed by The Weekly, Polniak deducted the $6,700 security deposit and sent the congressman a bill for the remainder. But Rohrabacher, 66 years old, by the way, and known even in friendly Republican circles for miserly inclinations, even though his family's known income easily tops $250,000 annually before counting lucrative congressional benefits, steadfastly ignored 7 of his ex-landlord's polite communications. In August, a year after he, his wife, and their triplets left the disaster and stiffed Polniak out of a week of due rent, the congressman hired a lawyer, Devin R. Lucas, to file a lawsuit in Orange County Superior Court. According to the complaint, Rohrabacher, who skipped all military service when he was eligible to fight in Vietnam and nowadays calls himself a patriot, seems like an unnecessary dig, but let's see, he thinks he and his wife are the victims in this dispute. He wants Polniak, a soft-spoken construction subcontractor who honorably served in the U.S. Marines, to pay him $20,000 for not refunding his security deposit in a timely manner. How would you get $20,000 out of that? With a scheduled April 2014 court management conference, oh, this is old, I wonder how that went. The case doesn't look close to a respectable resolution. Lucas has sent Polniak more than 50 hostile letters, a tactic apparently designed to win a default by handing the ex-landlord ever-increasing legal bills. What expenses Rohrabacher is incurring, if any, in the battle are unknown. Lucas, who lists his law office address as a Costa Mesa mail drop, did not respond to inquiries about whether he is providing the congressman free or discounted services. In September, Polniak filed a cross-complaint in court. That lawsuit alleges in part that the Rohrabachers failed to perform their obligations under the lease and have breached the terms and conditions of the lease in numerous material ways. Among the breaches, the congressman, who'd quietly bought a $1 million home in another part of Costa Mesa, refused to provide a forwarding address, for an extended period of time. That's not so serious. It sounds like trashing the place is the more serious. Behind the scenes, there's also allegedly been a not-so-subtle threat from Rohrabacher's camp that the 13-term congressman who first ran for office in 1988, while championing the imperative of term limits, will use his political weight and personal relationship with Orange County District Attorney Tony Rackauckas, I have no idea whether I'm pronouncing that right, to prompt a criminal probe as another intimidation tactic against Polniak and Witzel. No public record indicates that Rackauckas has taken sides in the civil dispute. When Rohrabacher moved in, we thought, wow, a congressman, this is great. What could go wrong? Recalled Witzel. We're normal, everyday people, and this situation has become really scary. Wow. Well, I don't know what that has to do, if anything, with the Russia situation, but it just gives you some sense of just, you're definitely dealing with a real wacko here, who's got just like no grounding in reality. These people are often odd, but adding disgusting on top of the list, I think, is pretty amazing. It reminded me a great deal of Duke Cunningham, actually. Mostly from the old stories about just how like physically disgusting his living conditions were. Remember his story, aside from all like the bribe menu, that he was actually corrupt. And it is weird that the two of them are likewise accused of various levels of corruption. But Cunningham was also like physically a weird, disgusting guy. He lived on that yacht in the Washington Marina. And you remember the story? He had a hot tub on the deck of the boat. And he was always constantly inviting people to come over and sit in the hot tub with him. And no one wanted to do it because he was filling the hot tub directly with water pumped out of the Potomac River. He was just pumping dirty, untreated river water into his hot tub and heating it up, which is like, you're just asking to get some sort of disgusting viral infection, I would think. I don't know, maybe that protects him in prison somehow. I'm contagious, don't touch me. I don't know what the whole idea was disgusting, but he also lived in squalid conditions. For a guy who was living on a yacht, you would think, he'd be living it up. And Rohrabacher in his nice house in Orange County, and then just rendering it a disgusting, filthy. What do you even have to do to get a place that dirty? You should see the pictures. Take a look. All right. Well, I'm not suggesting that has anything to do with Russia necessarily. It's just another illustration of how mentally unbalanced some of the people in this story can really be. Armando notes for me that Mueller is now, of course, announcing that he's expanding the probe into Trump business transactions. Trump will, of course, protest this as mission creep, as it were. Not that they had any problem as Republicans with mission creep in the Clinton investigations, but they know what it could mean when they do this. And this, of course, will be a likely trigger for his firing in Trump's mind. We'll see whether he ever gathers the courage to try that. I don't know why he wouldn't. The Congress is in no position to hold him accountable for it. Anyway, I just thought, that's worth noting. And Dana Rohrabacher's physical filth, I think, also somehow worth noting. All right, so let's see. The other news of the day, and there's so many things that we're not going to be able to get a chance to touch on. Other news of the day. Yesterday, Trump spent a good deal of time summoning the members of the Republicans in the Senate to the White House for another meal, another chance to, like we said, stuff his face. And I did get some nice notes about people who particularly enjoyed doing a Trump imitation while pretending to be stuffing your face and eating and having one of these meetings. But in addition to having these guys over for lunch, he also sat down with the New York Times and made plain that he had no understanding, not only in the interview with the Times, but in all of his discussions with the members of Congress and with the press. It became increasingly obvious that he had no working knowledge of what was and wasn't in the the tax bill that they're calling a health care bill. He had no idea what was in it or why things were or weren't in it. He was asking questions, as Joan told us, about selling insurance across state lines, et cetera, which we've known for months can't be included in this bill because they're using reconciliation. But he also just evidenced no working understanding of health care and how it's obtained in this country, including some comments that seemed to suggest that he thought that young people starting out in the working world were probably paying something on the order of about $1 a month for their health care premiums. Like, okay, sure, that's really well connected to reality. And I guess there were some reports that he had people in the room tearing their hair out, making these ridiculous promises about how, well, my healthcare system, it's going to be great. It's going to be beautiful. We're going to lower premiums. He was promising 60 and 70% cuts in premiums. And people are like, I can't believe you're promising this stuff. But I think he just continues to treat the presidency the way he treated his real estate career, with just puffery that it doesn't matter how much you exaggerate the benefits of what you're selling. In real estate, that's allowed. I don't know why, but they continue to, they insist, if you hold us to standards of truth and accuracy, we'll hardly be able to sell anything. Well, so what? But anyway, apparently, real estate is unique, in America, both in in how easy it is to, use it to launder money, because you have no particular obligation to know your client, although we've tried to tighten those things up, but also no particular obligation to be accurate in your description of the properties you're selling. So why be accurate in your description of the healthcare plan you're trying to sell? I think that's what's driving a lot of this. Okay. So how much time do we give to this? I'll jump in here by grabbing this Ezra Klein piece from Vox yesterday. Rarely does he sum things up very quickly, but I think we can maybe mine the essence out of this, of what happened yesterday. Trump can't make a healthcare deal because he doesn't understand healthcare. That really sums it up, and that's the headline of Ezra Klein's piece at Vox. Trump is uninformed, underprepared, and unclear, and this is the result. When the computer gets around to allowing me to scroll down instead of giving me the pinwheel of death, because it's processing something. Here we go. We'll see how long is this piece, and can we get through the key points of it quickly. The blame in the Senate healthcare's omnishambles. I like the recovery of the shambles word in this. I've been using it every time he travels abroad. Is attaching to Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, and understandably so. He wrote the bill, he designed the process, he owns the result. But the absence of President Donald Trump from the story is itself an important part of the tale. And I did see some discussion from Greg Sargent about it being somehow, he wasn't really buying into the whole idea that Trump didn't do enough to sell the bill, and it might have worked had he been there to sell it, or I'm not even sure what the angle was that Sargent was trying to take, but unconvincing to me. I mean, it's worth having the discussion, but I think a lot of the blame lies with Trump. Clearly, this was a top policy agenda item, and he had no ability to address it, and it suffered and lost as a result. I'm glad it did, but I think it's pretty clear. For better or for worse, Klein continues, policy leadership in the modern era tends to come from the White House. Take the Affordable Care Act. Though the bill was written in Congress, President Obama and his staff were involved at every step of its construction. They set the policy vision, used the technical resources of the executive branch to work through trade-offs, were deeply involved in the legislative process, and led the communications effort on the bill's behalf. Could they have done a better job? Sure, but they were there. The apex of this was the Blair House Summit. As the bill was floundering, Obama invited congressional leadership from both parties to the Blair House to debate the legislation on live television for hours. I remember. It was boring, but it worked. Obama was trying to prove to congressional Democrats that they could win the argument on health care, that he could win the argument on health care, and that they should trust him and pass the bill. It really is worth watching a few minutes of Obama's performance in this and contrasting it with Trump's role in the replacement effort. We, of course, don't have the time or the copyright clearance to do that, but it is embedded herein, and you should go ahead and take Ezra's advice. Obama's performance was effective because it was, to Democrats, persuasive. Obama knew the details of the legislation. He knew the issue, and he knew how Democrats thought, and so he made arguments they believed and persuaded them that even if the Affordable Care Act was a dangerous vote to take, it was still a vote worth taking. What happened publicly at the Blair House happened privately every day. Obama and his team were constantly working to sell wavering Democrats on the bill, to persuade them that the trade-offs were the right ones, to convince them this was a historic opportunity to achieve the Democratic Party's 80-year dream of universal health care. It's no accident that Obama's health care address to a joint session of Congress ended by wrapping the bill in the legacy of the late Senator Ted Kennedy and framing it as the great unfinished business of our society. The campaign worked In the Senate, the Democrats had 60 votes. They needed the 60. They got the 60. The Affordable Care Act was a heavy lift, and there are many who deserve credit for its passage, notably Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid, but I don't know anyone involved in that effort who thinks it could have been done without Obama and his White House. The GOP's repeal and replace effort, also a heavy lift, and it's been done without the productive involvement of Trump and his White House. In fact, Trump often made the process considerably harder. The core problem is Trump has no idea what he's talking about on healthcare and never bothered to learn. Nobody knew healthcare could be so complicated. He famously and absurdly said his inability to navigate its complexities meant he couldn't make persuasive arguments on behalf of the bills he supported. And he routinely made statements that undercut the legislative process and forced Republicans to defend the indefensible. Trump's post-election promise of insurance for everybody with much lower deductibles set up a standard Republicans had no intention of ever meeting, but kept having to answer for. In his occasional meetings with wavering members of Congress, he made superficial political arguments to people who had deep policy concerns. The discussions left legislators feeling insulted and annoyed that the president hadn't bothered to do the barest amount of homework. Those aren't people whose votes you're going to be able to change back. Because Trump doesn't understand the legislation or the trade-offs it made, he can't make persuasive arguments on its behalf in public or in private, so he mostly doesn't try. Trump and his team are not frequent presences in the public debate trying to sell the legislation they're so keen to sign. That's one reason the various bills routinely polled around 20%. Without Trump using the bully pulpit to argue on behalf of the legislation, critics, terrible Congressional Budget Office reports, and news of congressional infighting filled the void. When Trump does weigh in, it's often a disaster. Asked by Fox News' Tucker Carlson how he responded to analyses showing the House health bill would hurt the people who voted for him, he replied, "Oh, I know," and said the bill was very preliminary. Later, after holding a Rose Garden ceremony to celebrate the passage of the House health bill, he called it mean. But he never articulated a standard for a bill that wouldn't be mean, and he never came up with a policy that wouldn't hurt his supporters. Later, during a particularly delicate moment in the Senate negotiations, he tweeted that Senate Republicans should perhaps abandon the current process and immediately repeal and then replace at a later date. This tweet of no confidence didn't make McConnell's job any easier. At another point, Trump suggested it would be fine if Republicans failed to pass anything at all. In this context, Trump's missive yesterday, is comical. No one has ever heard Trump discuss with any specifics how good the Senate health care bill is. No one believes he can, or that it would be a good idea if he tried. And in his nonsensical tweet, the Republicans never discuss how good their health care bill is, and it will get even better at lunchtime. Lunchtime, it's time for lunch, everybody, let's sit down and eat. It's time for me to have 2 scoops of ice cream and fix everything. The Dems scream death as O-Care dies. Nobody even knows what that's supposed to mean. In a prescient post-election piece for the Conservative Weekly Standard, Yuval Levin and Gerard Alexander worried that Trump's disinterest in policy would lead to chaos in the legislative process, and probably not just on healthcare, on everything. In the absence of an opinionated final arbiter who could always be brought in, the policy process can easily become far less, rather than more, productive if President Trump is indeed to remain above the details, and if the executive branch is unlikely to be able to compensate for his relative apathy or absence. Congressional leaders may have to think very differently about their own role in the policy process. That might make for some opportunities, but only if members of Congress are prepared for what to many of them will be an unfamiliar and challenging task. They don't know how to do this either. Members of Congress, we now see, were not prepared for that task. McConnell is a legislative tactician. He might be the guy you want to pass your health care bill, but he's not the guy you want to write your health care bill, decide its contours, and make its policy trade-offs and argue its merits. By making McConnell that guy through his own inattention and ignorance, Trump set up the process for failure. The result was legislation nobody liked, that nobody could defend, and that looks likely to fail. And failure is, it's worth saying, a better outcome for the GOP and the country. The legislation is so poorly built and sold on so many lies that if it did pass, implementation would be a catastrophe. During the campaign, Trump posed as a master deal maker, but you can't make a deal if you don't understand what's being discussed, what the various sides want, or what the trade-offs involved in different concessions would mean. And you really can't make a deal if you don't know what you want or why you want it. Preparation, information, and clarity matter in policymaking, and the widely acknowledged reality that Trump is completely unprepared, woefully uninformed, and personally confused mattered here. It absolutely did. We won't have time to go over the actual a transcript of his interview with the New York Times, but I urge you to take a look at it. Friday might be a good day for us to just poke fun at it, but wow, is he an empty suit. It's unbelievable what he doesn't have it's unbelievable how little grasp he has of all this stuff. I don't know what else we can possibly even hint at in the minute or so that we have left, but there's so many things that we really need to get to. Some more writing from Mark Sumner that I think is really important. Perhaps we can cram that in. On Friday, we need to do some examination of how much collusion the Trump campaign might have conducted with respect to the Republican primary campaign. I even have something off on a tangent in a completely different direction from David Day, and always worth examining. And I'll hold it out there as a promise for tomorrow, which I'll probably break, but which you should be reading either Friday or over the weekend. Guess what's happening over on the student loan front? As it turns out, David's writing all about this. It looks like the student loan market may be marked by the same shortcomings and disastrous shortcomings and really shocking shortcomings that the mortgage market was marked by. In other words, the people who claim to hold the debt, and this is very important if you happen to owe some of that debt, the people who claim to owe the debt don't have any of the paperwork that proves that they own the debt. Amazing that happened in the mortgage market, and amazing that people were able to recover money anyway, even though they weren't even able to establish for a court that they were the holders of the debt. Disaster, I assume, looming in the student loan market as well there, because I don't know. I mean, you'd think we'd learned our lesson, but I think the lesson we really learned was that, rich people can pretty much still stroll into court even without the proof that they're owed any money and convince judges that they ought to get the money because they already have some now. Look at this fancy suit. Obviously, I couldn't have this suit if I wasn't a rich person. And if I wasn't a rich person, that money that I claim belongs to me wouldn't belong to me, right? So why don't you just hand it over to me? I don't know. We'll have to examine what's going on and see why there's even perhaps a glimmer of hope that this might work out better on the student loan front. But we'll spend some time on that either tomorrow or assign it to you for weekend reading, because God only knows when we'll catch up with all the details. We still have a million things outstanding, including persons 6 and 7 at the Trump meeting who we still haven't examined. And by the way, they have connections to the New York field office of the FBI. Armando will be interested in that. Maybe you can join me tomorrow and we'll chew through some of that. In the meantime, turning the airwaves over for the Thank God It's Jova D version of the after show right now. The story is up for discussion today. Malia Obama didn't lose her summer internship in Spain for smoking weed. In fact, she wasn't even there. What? I didn't even hear about this one. I missed the whole thing. 6 months ago, he was at the Oval Office's beck and call, but now Senate Intelligence Committee Chairman Richard Burr won't even visit the White House anymore. And much, much more to do with Russia, Trump, and everything else after this.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Much more coming up after this. By the way, apparently the Russians just leaked a report in which they urged Trump to bring a note taker to that unreported hour-long meeting with Putin. Pretty amazing. Plus there's some video floating out there as well of him trying to arrange the meeting. It's just Trump making wild gesticulations. No one knows what the hell he's talking about. Stay tuned. They'll sort it out for you next.